Welcome to the Catholic Dadcast by Rich Pintang, where we break down all things dad from a Catholic perspective. Now more than ever, we need dads to step up their game. Gentlemen, buckle up and get ready for battle. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the Catholic Dadcast. This is Rich Pintang, your host and founder, and we're broadcasting from Southern California. And I would tell you, we are recording on the cusp of the Easter celebration, and I'm just very pleased and honored to have this guest, to talk about the importance of him responding to what I think is a God moment where he understood what he needed to do. And my guest today really is an important person that I believe is an example of allowing God to work in your life, and this is the fruit that comes from it. He's the founder of Higher Ground, and they are serving at-risk youth through family services. And their mission statement at Higher Ground is to engage the entire person to facilitate exploration and discovery of life's possibilities through mentorship and expanding purpose, possibilities, and hope for the youth and families at risk. So welcome to the show, Joe Baldo.
Thank you, Rich. It's great to be here. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's been an amazing ride. So let's talk about it, and hopefully people will understand this incredible life that I've had and how it all seemed to unfold as God shared His blessings and guidance.
For those of you that might be just listening on audio format, you're missing out on Joe's awesome collection of crosses, which I believe you've carried many of them through life, right? Isn't it ironic?
There's multiple representations there. Yeah, these are all gifts that people have given me over the years, my wife and I, and some of them have some incredibly well. They all have wonderful memories, but some of them resemble some of the things that remind me of some of the things that I've gone through in this ministry.
Mm-hmm. Which I would believe is definitely a part of your story and where you are today, right? And I think that it's what's unique is that even what you do through Higher Ground is allowing those folks to engage in your services and realize that maybe this is just a part of their journey, but such an integral positive change. And I think what I'd love to do is really start at highlighting how Higher Ground, especially with the open house from last week. I'm assuming that the turnout was great and that you got a lot of great conversation there too.
We did. It was it's typical Higher Ground. It was planned to be this little thing, and then God bless the people that understand our mission. But we had people saying, because I told them I want to offer food. I'm a foodie, right? And it's always fun to.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I said it would be great when we go into our clubhouse that we've got sports fare, whether they're hot dogs or hamburgers or Cracker Jacks or something, and go into our STEM lab, and because everything is so sciencey, then let's think about like the mixology of things. So let's mix drinks, and although it was non-alcoholic, they were still very fun and flavorful, and so it was cool. We had a bartender in there, and he's mixing the juices and the different things. It was great. Anyway, so with that in mind, things started to ratchet up. And so this local restaurant said, well, I want to be part of this. And where I expected that I had to pay for these things, people were like, oh, I just want to bring this in. I said, well, what is that going to cost? Oh, no, 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 no. We want to donate this. You guys do enough for everybody. So then we ended up with sushi and our digital arts. It's like, are you serious? We're offering sushi now? It was great. So I was blown away, and people were blown
I
away.
would have put that on the flyer had I known there was going to be some sushi. My
Yeah,
gosh.
I mean, so whatever you wanted, there was fruit parfait in the garden, and shrimp. This delicious. It was almost like a ceviche in our family wellness center. I told the restaurateur, I said, just something healthy because it's the family wellness center, so it just has to say health. And we end up with shrimp and cucumber and tomatoes. It was great. So, anyways,
Oh man, that's so
that's
cool.
what happened. So,
That's so cool.
yeah,
Yeah, and I was gonna say that that would have been an awesome time for a lot of folks to really see, and just get a feel for what you guys do there.
yeah,
And you guys are on your, going on your 11th years is what I understand. And but if I go back to your story about how you made that decision to leave the family business,
yeah,
I think that's an awesome place to start, to really look at, you guys, you had something that you felt like um could sustain itself. You obviously secured major contracts, with the video production and such.
yeah,
I mean, maybe walk us through that decision that
yeah.
allowed you to realize this is what I need to do.
I'm going to go further back because our lives are centered around faith, believing in God and asking God, what is your will? What is it that I'm supposed to do with my life? Which is the basis of what higher ground is. It's about purpose and possibilities. When I speak at universities, I ask the college students, do you believe that you are on this earth for a purpose? Or did your mom and dad just have fun 9 months before you showed up and you're just, the result? And the look on their faces, so many of them have never thought about, why am I here?
Mhm.
Anyway, so with that in mind, I want to go back to when I was in the seventh grade, maybe the summer between seventh and eighth, and family dinner night. Very important, by the way, since we're talking about dads.
Thank
You
you.
got to have a meal with your kids. It's
Amen.
so important. If you can do that at least once a day. I mean, I realize we have to get up early and get out of the house to go to work. Breakfast with kids would be like, icing on the cake, but dinner is so important.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't realize that, all the modeling that my mom and dad did for my sister and I. But dinner time was a time to debrief over everything. So it was, well, Joe, tell me about school. What did you learn today? And what did you do after school? And who are the friends that you were hanging with? And did you play ball? Was it baseball, football, whatever? And then because I felt like, okay, well, I'm doing all the talking. So, Dad, how was your day at the meat plant? Right? And it's like, well, we had whatever, right? So, and I got a feel for what was going on in their life, which of course was preparing me because, again, I'll try and be concise, but I grew up in an Italian American, very traditional Italian American and Catholic family. So we did a lot together. We prayed together, we worked together, and we prayed together, played together, whatever. So it was all that, and my parents were just very saintly people. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to start somewhere around seventh or eighth grade. And typically the parents say, "Well, you got to be thinking about high school. Where do you want to go?" And there was the local Catholic school, which was Cantwell. We grew up in Monterey Park, so Montebello was right there. Of course, there were a couple of good public schools that a lot of my friends went to. But then there was this pie in the sky. There was Loyola High School in downtown Los Angeles, which was a good half an hour away. And so we had that discussion a couple times, and they said, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want to go. And Loyola just felt right. You do the tours of the school, and it was just like everything else in life, whether you're shopping for a car or for your first apartment or for your first home, you walk through 20 of them or whatever, and then you find the one that's like, this is home. This is where I want to be. This is where I need to be. And so I told them over dinner one night, I said, it's Loyola. And Loyola was more expensive than the other Catholic schools. And anyways, so my mom turned to my dad and she said, "Oh, that's so expensive. Are we going to be able to afford it?" And Dad looks at me and then he looks at my mom and he said, "Marie, God always provides." And understand that we always prayed together, we went to church together, but that was something outside of the context of what we typically do when we're talking about God and prayer. Here we are at the dinner table, and he throws that gem out. And obviously, it was profound because it stuck with me the rest of my life,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I caught on there. That
It's not all up to me, right?
that
It's not all going to
scenario
happen.
sticks out to you
Yeah, yeah.
profoundly.
So, anyways, with that in mind, I go to Loyola High School, and of course, 4 years with the Jesuits. For me, I couldn't get enough. They were awesome. And they really refocused my young life to become a strong Catholic Christian man. And so with that, I went on to Loyola Marymount. But this is where the story comes into play in terms of a true fatherly love, the love of God that's passed down to your father, and then that he passes it down to his children. So I was predestined to take over the family meat business. I was the seventh generation in a family meat business. My grandpa brought it from Italy to New York. My dad moved it with my grandfather from New York to Los Angeles. And, so there was number five, number six generation. I'm number seven. And I started working there in the sixth grade. So
7 generations. That's amazing.
yeah, and I was fine with it. I mean, like I said, I was born into it, and so I was the cleanup kid in the sixth grade, and then learned all different aspects of the business throughout high school and college. So when I graduate college, it was already determined, and I was fine with that. But the gray area was that in my sophomore year of college, I was introduced to television and film, and there's hard work in life, which was the meat plant, right? Where you have to sell hundreds of thousands of pounds to make money because you're making 3 cents a pound on the meat that you're selling. But then there's this creative, fun, kind of like being at Disneyland kind of thing, where you're creating video or film. Um, and oh, by the way, you might make like 10 times the money doing that than you would working your butt off in a meat plant.
Sounds attractive, right?
Yeah, it did, but it also seemed like a pipe dream, right? It was attractive to like, nah, I couldn't possibly do that.
Yeah, yeah.
This is already what I'm committed to. This is what I'm going to do. I mean, this is what I'm supposed to do. Anyways, long story short, so I I start this little company on the side, thinking that maybe I can, maybe get an upgrade in a car someday, or set aside some money to go to Europe or whatever, and fun money, right? And so that's my little Baldo production. And I'm working 40, 50, well, it was more than 40 hours. It was about 60 hours a week with my dad. And I loved it. But my little business started to take off. And pretty soon the side business, which I was doing maybe 1/4 of the time versus 3/4 of the time went into my 60 hours or whatever at the meat plant, was making more money than what I was making at the plant. And so with that, I took that as a sign from God that that really was my future, because that was the fun. And so I went to my dad and I said, "Look, I got a little problem here." And he knew it. He knew that things were happening. And I said, "I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads." And I thought for sure that he was going to say, "But this is what you're supposed to do, right? The meat plant's what you're supposed to do." And again, he surprised me and he said, "You know what, Joe? Life is long and hard, and you're going to work, if not your entire life, certainly most of your life. And so you need to do what you believe is your passion and what you think you're being called to do."
Hmm.
Well, okay, so I thought I was being called to work at the meat plant, right? Seventh generation, kind of a commitment, kind of a responsibility. But yet there was this other thing that, well, like I said, was fun and had the potential to be far more lucrative. And so with that, I realized what a loving father truly is. I bless my dad. um, my grandfather, on the other hand, was ticked and didn't talk to me for almost a year.
Wow,
Um,
1 full year. Holy cow. From
yeah,
one
yeah,
approval, the
yeah,
approval of a father, and
yeah,
then the other end of the spectrum.
yeah.
Uh that's what I was thinking was there had to have been there had to have been some tough conversations there where people were like, "That's a pipe dream. What are you talking about? This is a family business."
Right. Correct. Correct. And I understood that, which made it that much more confusing to me. Right. It's like, okay, so am I nuts? I mean, my dad is so loving and saying, go for it. But really the reality is I got this sure thing, you know? It's like the bird in the hand or the two in the bush. Typically you want to stay with the bird in the hand. Anyways, with that in mind, so the rest of the story is that my business took off and my dad was very proud. And after about a year, my grandfather came around and started speaking to me and said, and he'd call me Sonny. So Sonny, tell me what is this with the you take a pictures and what happens?
That's great.
And so as the years went on, 5, 6 years into my business, he was one of my biggest fans. He'd again, it was based up in LA, and he lived in Glendale, and so he'd call me over and say, "Hey, you want to come over for a little lunch? I understand you're going to be in Hollywood, so that's right down the street." And so I'd go over. He'd feed me, some delicious, some Italian feast, and we'd talk, and he'd try and understand what I was doing, but he loved it. I entertained him, if nothing else. So, and of course, then there's always that, and how much are they going to pay you for this? He was kind of amazed. So, anyways, that said, a gift from God, right? This whole thing, my entire career, a gift from God. My parents, a gift from God. My faith, a gift from God. And so, anyways, with that in mind, we're going to fast forward now to my midlife. So now I've been doing this for 28, 29 years with my beautiful, faithful wife. And she's the backbone of the company. She's the front of the office. So, she's doing the payroll and answering phones and typing up the contracts and all that stuff. And I
Mm.
just needed to worry about the sales and then the production and then the
It's
post production.
that's
Right.
amazing to me because that's exactly the way that our household runs also. My wife she's the brains behind everything, and I'm just happy to be the face per se. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's certainly a wonderful model for a great family business, that's for sure. So, and again, my parents modeled that, right, at the meat plant. So, okay, so moving forward, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I'm hoping we're on schedule for you. So, I'm in church one Sunday, and the priest's homily is on the verse which I had heard before, but it never really like got me between the eyes, the bullseye, right? And that was, to those much has been given, much is expected. And if you read a different Bible, it also is stated a little differently. To those much has been given or gifted, much is required. So, and I've read 3 or 4 different versions of it. And either way, it's like, yeah, I get it. Okay, I get it. I've been blessed. And just on a side note, besides all the things that I know are blessings, I was a huge baseball fan when I was a kid my entire life. Big Dodger fan. And my wife and kids gave me the gift of Dodger Fantasy Camp when I was 40. And so I went and got to not only meet my heroes from late grade school and high school, but I got to play ball with them. And the long and short of it was that when I received the souvenir video, it was not good. And it had the Dodger name on it. And so I just called them up and I said, I am not complaining. I had the week of my life. I have my heroes are now my friends. We call each other and talk. I'm like, are you serious? You didn't charge me enough for this thing. But because I am so appreciative of this week that obviously we had to pay for, but it was priceless. Um, I would like to offer my services if you realize that this video could be a marketing tool for you, but you really don't want to show this one because it looks like Uncle Harry shot it, and then when
It's
he
you gave the Dodgers tough love, but that's crazy.
had to, I had to, and it looks like that same Uncle Harry was a little tipsy, had a couple of drinks when he was editing, and I said it's poor home movies is what it is. And I thought they were gonna like throw me out of the office, but instead they're like, well, okay. I mean, it was kind of like put your money where your mouth is, kid. So I said I can show you some things that we do, and of course I had never done a sports camp before, but we had done several corporations where they have the convention where they they have a meeting in the morning and then play golf in the afternoon, right? That kind of thing. So I had golf and tennis and other things and interviews of the company bigwigs. And so I showed that, and they were like, that's very professional. And so I got the contract to do this fantasy camp thing with the Dodgers twice a year,
Hmm.
February and November. Well, imagine I don't think we could have afforded to go back and do it a second time, and yet I do the next 24 camps. So being part of the staff with the Dodgers, now I'm in with the coaches and some of the players because I'm there. And anyways, long story short, another gift. So that allowed me then to start playing ball with the retired pros and people who are just really good in baseball. I share that with you, of course, not to brag. I can only tell you that my life is kind of like a Forrest Gump. I ended up in places that'd be like, well, what am I doing here? I'm not supposed to be here, right? And yet I was. And so that allowed me to end up on a team uh, where we were able to travel the country and play other teams like from the Cubs or the Mariners or the
Just
Yankees.
for the record, Joe, this is Chicago Chicago Cubs blue.
There, there you go. You're a Cubby fan. But who doesn't love the Cubs, right? I mean, I think the whole world, when the Cubs finally went to the World Series, I think the whole world outside of who were they playing? They were playing. I know this. Was it Milwaukee? Who was it?
Oh my gosh,
Cleveland. It was Cleveland.
it was Cleveland because they
It was
were
Cleveland,
ahead.
and I understand. I'm sure that all of Ohio was rooting for Cleveland, but I think the rest of the world was rooting for the Cubs. Anyways, so with that in mind, and then it got even crazier. And I'm going to close with this whole baseball segment of my life. But one of the guys said, as great as this all is, and as much as America loves baseball, do you know who loves baseball even more than the Americans? I'm like, no, who? The Japanese. So this guy had played pro ball in Japan. And so he said, I can make a couple of calls and we can play some teams in Japan. Who wants to go? And everybody's like, yeah. So I told my wife and my kids, and like, yeah, let's go. So we go as a family, and I'm playing ball against these Japanese. Anyways, long story short, we had such an awesome time. And then on the plane ride back, somebody else with a Hispanic descent says, well, even though the Japanese love baseball more than Americans, do you know who loves baseball more than the Japanese? No, who? The Cubans. I'm like, no, really? So that was '05 was our first trip to Japan, and then '06 we end up in Cuba playing the retired Cuban pros.
Oh my
And I'm
gosh.
standing there in the stadium in Havana, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here, and how did this happen? So, anyways, long story short, am I grateful? Am I thankful? Absolutely. Did God shower me with buckets of gifts? Yeah, yeah. Don't deserve any of it.
And that actually that's the way I see it, Joe. I mean, as much as you prefaced, this is not to brag. Again, it is a gift, and then you recognize that. And in a lot of cases, it's easy to be complacent when you're showered like that.
Yep.
Praise him at the top of the mountain,
Yep.
but praise him also in those valleys. And that's why I think it's profound to me to see that you recognize that I don't even know if I even deserve this. There's definitely a sense of humility there. I would never look at it as being braggadocious at all. And I just think that that's just amazing to see. Again, it's obviously in retrospect leading you to what I think is like even a higher calling with higher ground. I mean, that's just amazing to see that you're trying to gift that back to the people you serve.
It was obvious. It was just, again, to those much has been given, much is expected. And again, you understand where I'm coming from. I didn't deserve any of this. I didn't earn any of it. The only thing that, if you want to try and put an earthly logical brain around this, the only thing that I can think of is that I was um, I was a faithful son. I did what my parents wanted me to do, of course, until I split off. But I had their blessing on that. I was a faithful husband, a faithful dad. Um, when this is very personal, but since we're close, we go to church together and whatnot. When I started my company, and understand that it was like right when I got out of college, right? So I'm in my 20s, and this is now the late 70s, early 80s, and porn was really coming into, right? I don't want to say the mainstream, but the video stores were opening, and there was that little area in the video store with a curtain that the kids couldn't go through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there was a plethora. Okay, being in the video business, I was hit upon. I was whatever asked um, if I would be interested in doing that type of work. And even though I was thankful for the money that I was getting, it wasn't anywhere near the money that could be made in porn.
In that market, certainly.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And I said no. And I said no because I, again, my parents, my dad, um, from when I was very young, and I'm getting pretty damn emotional here, so this is kind of ridiculous, but when I was a boy and all my life, he said, Joe, show me your friends and I'll tell you what kind of a person you are. And so, of course, that profound statement stayed in my heart my entire life. And so the people that I am around, that I am surrounded by, I get to pick, and I want them to be the best people that I can have as friends and family. Because when you don't have that, you end up kind of sliding down a little bit, and you can easily go on the wrong path. And
Mm-hmm.
I've watched many of my friends do that, and it's ruined their lives, their relationship with their kids. Yeah. Anyways, enough said. So the only thing I can think of is that I had that. I guess I've had a few fork in the roads, haven't I, Rich? But that was
Certainly.
definitely a fork in the road in my career where I just said no. But boy, I could have been a lot richer.
I tell you, man, that to me is like, it's so tempting. You talk about lead us not into temptation. I mean, that money's sitting there, and you're probably running into people in your industry that are banking off of it.
Yeah,
You know, and if you think about it, how fortunate were you that in your home you were given those roots of, this is what we stand for,
yeah,
these are the values we carry, and it's uncompromising, even when you feel like, you can take the easy route and I'll take a couple here or there.
yeah.
You just know, that's not our brand, that's not what we stand for.
I'm starting to see why you asked me to be on this podcast. So my mom and dad played a huge part, but again, these little gems that came out of my dad's mouth really did shape my life, and certainly propelled me to the success that I've enjoyed.
So I think, Joe, my PSA right now to the men
Yeah,
is, even though we don't think our kids are watching or listening,
yeah,
they are.
you
They
bet.
totally are. And I think that's where I encourage myself, and to again surround myself in fellowship with men that carry that protect that are vigilant, because if you compromise, then you get to see what society dictates, and we see where that is. And it's crazy to me now that I think about it, Joe, is a lot of the families that you serve are families that maybe come from a broken family and or relationship, and that's probably what you saw in serving, in the juvenile ministry.
That's why what happened to me in this transformation from being a video producer and playing baseball and having the time of my life to serving these underserved families was so profound. It was like I got punched in the face. And let me explain. So I have my midlife crisis, which was not your stereotypical male midlife crisis. I didn't want to dump my wife. I didn't want to get red Ferrari and tootle around Newport and hit cocktail hour and hit up on girls half my age.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing, by the way. It's a real thing. Mine was the opposite. I I would look at my wife at the dinner table or whenever we could be together because I'm a workaholic, um, and I would think, how blessed am I? How beautiful is she? How beautifully is she aged? Um, what a blessing she has been as a wife, as a mother, as a business partner. I mean, you name it. I hit the lotto with Barbara. Same with my kids, and I'll explain that in a minute. But it just couldn't. Two more gifts, right? Barbara's a gift, and my son and daughter are gifts.
Certainly.
So we got to get to the story, right? Got to get to it. There's been a whole lot of side stuff, so it's all my fault. So I apologize. So, anyways, the midlife crisis. To those much has been given, much is expected, and I realized that it was time for me to serve others. And of course, that's the biggest question mark in life. What do you do? What is your purpose? What are you being called to do? I don't know. So you pray. And for the first time in my life, and I will not fib with you about anything, this is all the truth. For the first time in my life, I'm embarrassed to say, my prayer was, not my will, Lord, but your will. I again, being raised with the Jesuit education, there's the 4 forms of prayer, right? And so you praise God and you thank God, and then you apologize for all the things you've done wrong, and then you petition, right? And of course, my petition was, I need to get that Chevron oil contract. Lord, thank you for the Department of Defense contract, but I really want to work with Major League Baseball. And of course, that all happened. And again, all part of the gratitude. It's like, how does this happen? So God is how it happened. Anyways, so with that in mind, now I'm committed to finding something. So of course, I'm reading to the kids at the Blind Children's Center. I'm working in the soup kitchen and serving those in need. Sleeping over at the, there are so many people that want to help at a homeless shelter, but there aren't a whole lot of people that are willing to spend the night there, right? Because they need some non-homeless people to kind of be in charge at night. So I was fine volunteering during the day, but I'm like, excuse me, you want me to like get a sleeping bag and sleep on the floor here? Are you serious? But again, I had told God, not my will, but yours. And so he gave me lots of opportunities. And so with that, it was a homeless man that told me, Joe, you know where you need to go? You need to go to prison. That's where your ministry needs to take you. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not a prison guy. I don't want to do that. And he had a good sales pitch. He said, these conversations that you and I have been having, I look forward to them. And I said, Larry, I look forward to them too. I look for you in the line, and then after you eat, I try and eat a little something with them after everybody's served. And then we talk. And sometimes it was an hour. And the guy was, have you either met somebody that you're just not sure where they're genius or they're just a little crazy? And I never knew with Larry. But with that in mind, he dropped the bomb and introduced me to going to prison and prison ministry. And so, long story short, as much as I did not want to do that, that's my bad. Because I told God, I'll do whatever you want, but I did draw the line. So yeah, I admit I was a hypocrite. I really struggled with making that call. And the prison ministry led me to juvenile hall, and I was in juvenile hall in 08, 9, and 10. And the experience was so profound because all this time that we've been talking, Rich, about our wonderful parents and the family life and whatnot, the teenagers in juvenile hall introduced me to the entire other side of life, the side that I knew nothing about, and that is not having a father. Quite possibly having a great mom, and because of her greatness and her love for her family, she won't just work one job, she'll work 2 to make sure that they have food on the table and they're in an apartment, a roof over their head, and that they're going to school. Problem with that is if you're working 2 8-hour jobs, or even if it's a 6-hour and 8-hour, you really aren't home to be with your kids. And so therefore they don't have a dad because he's gone for several reasons, which we don't need to get into today. But even though they have a mom, they really can't experience their mom. So what happens? And so what happens is, from what I gathered, what I was taught by the kids in juvenile hall, is that they're left out in the open exposed. And the people who are looking for those kids are predators. And they could be gangsters that want to secure them into a gang, or there could be perpetrators in human trafficking, and others, I'm sure you know. So gangs, drugs, prostitution, and human trafficking.
The word,
Those
Joe,
are,
the word that comes to mind is vulnerable. They become vulnerable, and
yep.
they just head down the wrong path, which is why I'm thinking you're even with the type of programs, the mentoring, the empowerment that comes with those interactions, because you, quite frankly, you didn't have to be there to talk to Larry, and if anything, he saw something in you that would allow God to use that gift elsewhere, which has led you to what you do, and that hope that you must instill in that interaction with the kids and their families is, it just must be so rewarding.
Well, they taught me a lot, and I owe them my new life. I got to tell you that. So the education I got from those kids in juvenile hall, not just the boys, but the girls, to learn that they were repeatedly raped, um, was a shock to me. And then to add insult to injury, that it wasn't just the gang members in their neighborhood, but it was sometimes their cousins and their uncles. And in 3 cases, 3 girls were raped by their dad.
Hmm.
Now, uh, what do you say to a teenage girl who's telling you this? I mean, there are no words. And so, with that, we would look at each other and then we would just cry. Um, Enough said on that. And so, yeah, those kids, they broke my heart. I don't know how else to say it. And somehow from that, um, I realized as I watched the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I watched these kids as they were detained in juvenile hall, and we as volunteers would listen to their stories. And then when we were asked for advice or suggestions, we would offer that. Never preach to the kids. Nobody wants to be preached to. What everyone needs in life is someone to be a loving heart and a listening ear for them. And I think that was why I was so connected to them and why they were so connected to me. And so after 3 years of watching this miserable um, merry-go-round where the kid is released, goes back to the same people doing the same thing, and then gets caught and comes back in. And I look at Juan or Lupita or John or Mary or whoever and say, what happened? You told me that that was your last time, and yet here you are again. And when they cried, which most of the time they did, I knew that they tried and failed. I knew that deep down they were really good kids, but they didn't have a chance. And so my badge was turned in on a Friday, and I stood as close as I could to the release door, which isn't all that close, on Monday, waiting for the kids to come out. And it wasn't anything creepy because I knew them and they knew me. So it wasn't like this weird old man, this perv waiting for them. And I'd see the big smile on their face and be like, what are you doing here? And I'd be like, I'm welcoming you to freedom. And then I'd offer them $10 because they had no money and they needed to get home. And you understand that with no money and having to go to another city, there's a really good chance that they would do something stupid to try and get some money or just hitchhike, which is never a good idea, right? So either way, it was perilous for them to get home. And sometimes they would end up being arrested for the thing that they did just trying to get home. I
Mm.
mean, it's a ridiculous cycle. And so with that in mind, I'd offer them the $10, say, here's bus money, get home safely, or if you feel comfortable, I'm happy to drive you home. No one said no to that offer. They wanted me to take them home. And then what was even more surprising the first 2 or 3 times was that when we got to their apartment complex, whether it was in Stanton or Garden Grove or Anaheim or Santa Ana, wherever it was, they were like, come on in. I want you to meet people. And I want them to meet you. I want mom to meet you. I want my older sister or my brothers. Well, the blessing on all that is that I had been listening to these kids for at least 1 year, many times 2 years, and sometimes 3 years. And so I met the aunt who was hooked on meth. I met the older siblings that were hooked in gangs and didn't want to be in there anymore. I met the mom who was either an awesome mom who was hardly ever there because she was working the two jobs, or maybe I met the mom who wasn't such a good mom. And so, with that, by the time I said goodbye to that youth and all the people that I met, family and friends, I'd go back to my car with a binder and write down as much as I could remember their names and what their challenges were, whether it was gangs or meth or prostitution or whatever. And deep down, I knew since I had that deep connection with that kid, I could have a deep connection with all of their family and friends. But how do you do that? Well, it couldn't be just me. So I started rounding up the troops, starting with my baseball buddies. And then after church, I'd wait outside and my wife would say, "Don't do it. Don't do it." And I'd find somebody and say, "Hey, how about you join me? I got this group of kids in Santa Ana and whatnot." And by that time, it was 3, 4 months into this pick up the kids, bring them. I had hundreds of kids because of all the people I met. And also, there was a gang unit cop who retired, and his ministry, he was called just like I was, his ministry was to walk the streets at night, the same streets that he patrolled.
Hmm.
But now he had this windbreaker that said lives worth saving, and he wanted to save those young lives. So I bumped into him in Santa Ana working with these kids, right, in the neighborhood, playing soccer, whatever. And of course, he comes up to me and says, "Who are you and what do you think you're doing here?" "I'm playing soccer." He said, "You can't be here. This is not, these little kids are, some of these kids are gang members, and there's the rival gang down there, and you don't want to be around here." Long story short, we became very good friends. He educated me on gangs and drugs and prostitution more than what the kids had told me. And then he invited me to walk the streets at night. And it was in those late night, early morning walks that I would meet other kids that, quite honestly, they were just lost. They were good kids, but because they were under the control of gangsters or drug pushers, they had to be there at midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning. Long story short, I would invite them to come to the nearest park with all the others. And so every day of the week, I was in a different park um, playing sports, which of course I'd always ask people, "What do you want to play?" And the kids are like, "Soccer," of course, right? So we'd play soccer first. Then I'd pull out the pizzas, the sub sandwiches, the hot dogs, hamburgers, whatever, and we'd eat. And that was our time to talk. So maybe I'd get 2 or 3 friends from our church. Maybe I'd get 4 or 5 of my baseball buddies that I played ball with on the weekend. And we'd be in a park at 4 or 5 in the evening, playing ball and eating pizza or whatever and talking. And the talk could be about, I need a job, or my girlfriend's pregnant and I don't know what to do, and all the challenges that you can imagine, and a whole lot more that you can't imagine that these kids had to deal with. We talk about it. And if asked for suggestions or advice, we'd offer it. But again, no preaching.
Yeah, I think that,
So,
I think that even that portion, Joe, what it reminds me of is the fact that Jesus went after the marginalized. He went after those that he didn't go after those in a some sort of position of power or anything. I mean, I'm just thinking back to your comments about being in juvenile hall and and you're almost having those prodigal son moments where they're coming back and you're saying, "What happened? What do why are you back here?" And then being the smart man you are, trying to head that off and investigate what happens when they walk out of here. And you got to see it. You got to realize this is where it begins, is once they walk out of here, what happens? Where do they go? Where are they surrounding themselves? And if anything, just like, us as faithful Catholics, the one place we feel like we can have a safe place to go is at church, in the sacraments, and putting things in front of the cross. Whereas these children, if anything, you allow them to have a psychologically safe place to share that conversation where they probably don't, considering all that trauma that they've gone through. I mean, it must be so heartbreaking, yet so rewarding to be that person in those conversations, right?
Yeah, yeah. You hit some key words there. Heartbreaking, definitely. Rewarding, through the roof. We got to speed this up because these people whoever's listening, 3 or 4 people, whoever it is, they're probably saying, "Hey, like wrap it up, Joe. Let's go, buddy. I got Saturday or Sunday or whatever to do stuff." So again, I apologize. I'll try and speed it up. So I ended up in these 5 cities, these 5 different parks. So in Santa Ana, it was Madison Park on the corner of Edinger and Standard. In Anaheim, it was Ponderosa Park. And there were 2 police-involved shootings in downtown Anaheim in 2012. So I had been on the outs, which is what the kids call it, not being in juvenile hall, on the outs, for a good couple of years. And I ended up being asked by the city of Anaheim after this riot broke out because of the 2 shootings, major social unrest. And after the riot was squelched, the city was looking for anybody and everybody to engage kids in a positive manner. So they went to the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. There are large churches there that had some sort of a teen outreach. And so they, of course, met with them and said, you need to beef it up. Whatever you're doing, double it. They even had their libraries open up until 10 at night, like these kids want to go to the library, but whatever. They were, if nothing else, it shows they were trying to do anything and everything they could. So I get a phone call like, hello, Mr. Baldo. Yes. Yeah, hi, this is so-and-so from the city of Anaheim, and we understand that you're meeting up with a large group of kids in one of our parks. I didn't know whether to say, nope, not me. It's like, no, you can't lie, Joe. You got to tell the truth. I'm like, yes, I am. And well, tell me, what are you doing? I'm like, oh crap, that doesn't sound good at all. Is this a cop? I mean, what? I'm not a perv. I just want to help these kids. So of course I go all the way back. I was in juvenile hall for 3 years. Da 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 da. They hear the whole story. And I said, so now these kids are on the outs, but it's not just, I'm not playing ball with kids that I know from juvenile hall. It's like anybody and everybody that can show up. And we keep telling the kids every time we played ball and ate, if you had fun, invite more friends. And so it grew. So it could have been like 10 or 12 kids the first time, but then it was 25 the second time. And of course, it was over 100 within, 2 months or so. And so it was getting a little expensive, the food and sometimes, I don't know how it was. I'd pull out the baseballs and the softballs and the basketballs because I'd pulled out all the sports, right? And it was the funniest darn thing. Not as many went back into my car that came out of the car. And I don't know where they just kind of disintegrated. I don't know where they went. But in any event, so this city of Anaheim was very interested. And they said, we've got Disneyland here and we've got gangs and drugs and prostitution, just like every other city. But the darndest thing, people know that other cities have it, but people only think of Anaheim as the happiest place on earth. Mm. And we got some issues. And I learned. I didn't know that either until I was in juvenile hall. And anyways, long story short, they said, we want you to just do your thing here, right? Just keep doing your thing and just don't do the other cities. Let the other cities can find their own Joe, but we got Joe here. Hmm. Yeah. Sorry, can't do that. So I told them I can't let these kids down. So here's another confession. I was hell-bent on staying with those 5 cities and being there one day out of the week. But they asked for a second meeting, Anaheim did. And in so doing, they threw out a huge carrot to me. It was a bribe. And I took it. They said, we know that you're bopping around town with some of your friends and renting time in parks. So you could be guaranteed that time to have with the kids. How about we give you a park? I said, what do you mean give me a park? Just pick a park. I'm like, and I'm thinking, is this one of these dreams? Is this really real? Is a city saying take a park? So as I told you, I had some gang member friends, gang unit. Well, I had gangster friends too. But on the police side of things, I had cops that I had met while I was out there with the kids. Same thing in Anaheim. And so I called these two gang unit sergeants and said, the city is willing to give me a park to do this. Um, and after a few expletives like, you got to be. And so I said, yeah, no, it seems to be real. So help me pick a park. Well, as it turns out, there was this one park. There are gangs throughout the city. It's no secret. Some gangs will just be in one park. Other gangs, there might be two gangs in a certain park. This park was Lincoln Park, and there was a gang that actually held court in the bleachers. Would be on the west side of the park, and then another gang was on the east side of the park, and they were in this cul-de-sac, and they did their business as well as their drugs and everything there, but they had their sales efforts going there. And so, long story short, on top of that, there were three other gangs within a half a mile radius of this park. So they said, because I said, I think I want the worst park because all this is God. And if I'm going to do something, I want to make a statement. If I was to do a so-so park, then people are like, well, yeah, sure. But that was, that was a park. That's easy. So I said, just give me the worst park and let's see what God's got in mind. Long story short, we take Lincoln Park, and let's just say the Holy Spirit really took over. I take credit for this, and I'm going to say it again. I can take no credit for this because I couldn't have thought of asking for a park. I couldn't have imagined having a park. And I couldn't have imagined being friends with these two sets of gangs. St. Paul had it right, Rich. Love does conquer all. And all I did was realize that if I was to go to these guys and say, you need to leave because I want to have kids come in here and play, I would get the opposite. I would then be their enemy because they were there first, and I'm telling them to go somewhere else because of me. That wasn't going to work. But St. Paul says love conquers all, and I needed to conquer. And so I did everything I could to serve those kids.
Every reason why you couldn't do it is the reason why you had to.
So one thing I know, both with my meat plant background, my parents' upbringing, and my years in video production, that you need to find out what the needs of your customer are, and then you need to supply those, whatever those needs are, you need to supply. So as silly as this sounds, the first thing these kids needed, and they were teens and early 20s, was that they would start drinking these tall 40s, right? Somewhere in the mid-afternoon, and then they'd go over to smoking dope. Now, I've never smoked dope, but I did some research on it, and I know that once you get buzzed, you get the munchies. And I knew that they would enjoy a box full of munchies from somebody. So I would come in right after they'd been token for about an hour and a half, with the Cheetos and the hot Takis and the Doritos and all the chocolate bars and it was, they didn't understand me. They didn't know what to do with me. They accused me of being an undercover cop. They always said, we're just waiting for you to call the cops on us. And I said, they aren't coming. I even told the police department, please don't come because they're going to blame me for it. Right?
You lose all credibility.
And yeah, the guys, they show up and they have like 20
I told you.
guys go, you called them, right?
I knew it.
Yeah. And so, and we talk. And as ridiculous as the conversations were, the higher they got, the more ridiculous they became. But they remembered that I was there for them.
Yeah, and you build trust through that. That was all relationship.
That's all it is. We're all human. We're all, I'm no better or more special than anybody else.
Whether it's baseball or sports,
yeah,
or Cheetos and Takis, wherever whatever it takes.
Yeah, and they wanted to talk about they're all into rap, right? And so I had to I had to learn some of these rappers and had to listen to some of this terrible music, but I had to speak the language, right? And
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course, they're guys, right? And so they want to talk about girls and sex and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we talked about it. But what happened is that, again, could only be the Holy Spirit. People have needs, and so I met that first very superficial need. But really, what was needed? What was needed was they needed someone to listen to them, to validate them, as opposed to put them down and call them names. But then you start planting seeds like, where are you going with your life? What do you want out of life? Do you want to stay here and drink beer and smoke dope? I mean, there's so much more. And I
Right,
would tell them
right back to
about
the
how I played
purpose.
baseball. And yeah, what is your purpose? I didn't, my purpose was being in a meat plant, I thought, until God opened up a door and then I produced video. It was awesome. Who wouldn't want to create video, right? I showed them a couple of things that I had produced 10 years before or whatever. And like, you did this? Really? Yeah. And of course I said, well, it's not just me, it was a whole team, right? But you could do that. Or you could do whatever you want. And then we started talking about, what do you want to do? What would you want to do? Well, I'd like to be a mechanic. Great. And so with that, when someone is here, but they want to be here, it's all you have to do is draw a line and say, this is how you get there. Because otherwise, these kids are like, I have no idea how to do that. And so within about 8 months of this relationship, some of these guys wanted to walk me back to my car, which was scary at first because I didn't know what was going to happen. Be like, hey, I'd say goodbye, and I'd start walking. I'd take about 8 to 10 steps, and somebody would say, hey, wait up. I'm like, oh crap, is this where my life ends? You know, which I didn't know why, right? Because we were becoming friends.
Yeah.
But then they'd say, an individual, one at a time. They wouldn't do it in a group. Hey Joe, I could use your help.
I
Yeah.
love it. Oh, I loved hearing it.
um, we talked about being a mechanic, or how do I do that? Can you hook me up? Or other kid was like, I just need a job. Can you help me get a job? Hell yes, I can help you get a job. I had no idea where we were going to get the job, but there was the ask, and all I needed to do, right? The customer, there's a need, got to find that. And so I went out and helped these kids find jobs. And within 8 months or so, somewhere around there, maybe it was a year, I think we got 7 guys jobs. Now, I had street cred because the cops weren't coming,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Imagine the credibility I had where now I'm the fixer, for lack of a better word. I called myself the fixer, not to them, but internally I was the fixer. Do you know what they called me? I was the shit.
I was waiting for you. I know you had a street name.
I love being called a husband or a dad or a grandfather or CEO or executive
It means
director.
so much, right?
If you're the shit, you've hit the pinnacle of life.
And that's why I think that you realize that all that time that you spent with them, forming that relationship, building that trust, and having that credibility, they're like, this dude just cares about us, and I think that's what's amazing is that I would think that the way you lead the organization is the way that your staff tries to really bring out the best in those folks, the people that they're working with,
Yeah.
because I just can't imagine that, you know, I'm just thinking that like everything we talked about is really just scratching the surface of what you guys are doing at Higher Ground. And
And
if
we're out of time. We're out of time.
yeah,
We got to say
I know.
goodbye because
Can you
people are going to be like, "Dude, I'm done with you." Right? Maybe we need a
imagine?
part. Maybe we need a part two. Maybe we just cut it here.
I want to say that there could be, and in fact, I would just tell the folks that are listening that go to highergroundoc.org. Between the programs that they're running, I always encourage you guys, listeners, that you got to use your time, talent, and treasure. And it may not come to you right off the get-go, but you got to be willing to sacrifice, put yourself on the line, and really get uncomfortable, because like brother Joe said, he wouldn't have realized all this unless he was rooted in his faith. He approached every day with gratitude. he was able to understand that how much he was blessed with, and really all of us have to be the light of the world. But brother Joe, I'm greatly appreciative of your time. How inspirational your story is. But any final words before we wrap up here that you'd like to share?
I can tell you that I now know upon reflection of my life how important a dad is, because there's so much more to the story. I haven't even told you about what happened with my son and I, which is another incredible story that people can be like, "Nah, you're making this up." Like, no, it really happened. And
Stay
then
tuned.
and then the universities that got involved, and all these other organizations, just to try and put this. I mean, if you'll have me back, whatever you listeners just heard, I don't want to say it's the tip of the iceberg, but hold on to your seats, because this crazy, very improbable story becomes even crazier and even more improbable. And I'll prove it if you listen in the next time we do this.
And
But
that is
God
the
is good.
cliffhanger.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just yeah. But you young dads out there, um, God is there, and all you have to do is ask. And you ask Him, "What is your will?" And these incredible things begin to happen in your life. Just think about decrease me, which is obviously part of my prayer. Holy Spirit, decrease Joe and increase you. And these improbable blessings, and I'm afraid to call them miracles, because that freaked me out when somebody told me that miracles were happening around me. So I'm not going to say that, but improbable blessings continue to happen, and they can happen to anybody. I am no special person. All you have to do, part of your prayer, decrease me, increase the Holy Spirit, show me what I'm supposed to do in my life. What is my purpose? What are the possibilities around me? And life becomes like a slice of heaven. I
Hmm.
don't know how to say it.
You love God, love each other, and it's amazing how God reveals Himself in your relationships, in your life, especially when you feel like you're alone in these things. But I can certainly anticipate that the second episode that we do is going to be even more powerful. Because I think you recognize how that family unit was such an integral part, the things your father said, and that's really one of the reasons why I started the Catholic Dadcast, was to just to really empower men to live up to those standards. And just like we always do, leaving everything on the field and let God do His part. Let Him do the heavy lifting. We just let Him use us. And but Joe, we'll do it again, and I can assure you it'll be just on fire, just like this was. But uh, you know, we'll pray for you. We'll pray
Thank you.
for
Pray for higher
the
ground.
listeners,
Thank you.
and
Yeah. And I will pray. I will pray for all of these listeners, because just the simple fact that they're listening in tells
mhm.
me that they're definitely on the right path, right?
I
They're searching,
I'd like
they're
to think so.
wondering what's out there, whatever. And not that I have all the answers, but I know a guy who's got all the answers. And he's the one that said, when somebody came up to him and said, "You got all these commandments and whatnot. So, like, what's the most important one?" And he said, "Love God and love one another." Made it very simple, and that's what higher ground is. It's loving everyone and being family to them. For those that don't have a complete family, we are their family, and it's God, it's the Holy Spirit. I don't know how else to say it.
Highergroundoc.org. Brothers and sisters, this podcast episode is ended. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.